Hi, welcome to another Sneak Peek Saturday with the Alameda Free Library. My name is Jenny, and today we're going to read a memoir. Well, not the whole thing, obviously. And it's called I Live a Life Like Yours by Grue. So I'm going to read you a little bit of a summary, what this is going to be about, and then we're going to get started with the first chapter. I'm not talking about surviving. I'm not talking about becoming human, but about how I came to realize that I had always already been human. I am writing about all that I wanted to have and how I got it. I am writing about what it cost and how I was able to afford it. Grue was diagnosed with spinal muscular atrophy at the age of 3. His story unfolds as he sifts through his youth with his parents and sister in Norway, his years of study around the world, and his current life as a professor, husband, and father. Interspersed among these memories are elegant, astonishingly wise reflections on the world, social structures, disability, loss, relationships, and the body. In short, on what it means to be human. I Live a Life Like Yours is a love story. It is rich with loss, sorrow, and joy, and with the details of one life. It is a story about accepting one's own body and limitations, and learning to love life as it is while remaining open to hope and discovery. All right. There we go. From time to time, I crossed paths with someone who knew me as a child, but never really expected to meet me as an adult. Out of common courtesy, they are usually able to conceal their surprise at seeing me out in the world until an opening, a gap in the conversation, allows them to the space to articulate their initial reaction. So, you're still alive? My junior high ethics teacher once told a story. When her husband died, she cut off her long hair. Afterward, she sank beneath the water in her bathtub. This she experienced as a purification. She was interested in rituals, and she brought a measure of gravity to her class that I valued as an extremely grave 14-year-old. I wanted to learn as much as possible. Time, it seemed, was running out. My ethics teacher taught me the term liminal phase. It describes the most vulnerable part of a rite of passage. The point at which one finds oneself between worlds. It is the period in which a young person is no longer a child, though not yet an adult, and when the dead have abandoned the world of the living but cannot yet be counted as ancestors. During these phases, things can go drastically wrong, but they are also where transformations take place. We come into being in these phases. Without them, the world could not go on. I progressed from junior high to high school and then on to university. And then, one day, I ran into my old teacher again at a conference. She had gone to graduate school. Her master thesis was a Norse mythology on the Jotuns, symbolic of the dark and treacherous aspects of human existence. I was a doctoral student in linguistics. I had begun an in-depth study of rhetoric and how reality may be altered through language. She had written a history of mentalities about modes of thinking that we can no longer fathom. Our worlds had reconvened in a sense. My old teacher wasn't surprised to hear that I was pursuing my doctorate. The junior high school was a 10-minute walk from the university library, where I once used my mother's car to borrow books on the shamanism of indigenous Siberian tribes. I was familiar with the academia from childhood, and it showed. It shaped others' impressions of me. It promised a particular kind of future in the same way that the opening sentence of a book points to how the story is going to unfold. She was, however, surprised at how good I looked. This was the other narrative of the future, the one that didn't have to do with my language, but with my body. This phrase makes me feel uncertain. You look so good. Yes, don't I? I dress nicely. I've spent time educating myself about cut, about style. I got a tailored coat when I was 18. I like coats with cuffs that can be unbuttoned and Oxford shirts with collars that roll the right way. But that wasn't what she meant. What lies beneath the surprise that I am still alive surfaces only later in the conversation. Or at least this is what happened with an author I knew from high school. 10 years later, we stood together in the grand ballroom of Oslo's Hotel Bristol. With a blend of melancholy and reluctance, her eyes smiled. She remarked that I was something they all knew back then. That it was something they all knew back then, the fact that I was not going to live for very long. Something they all knew, huh? This wasn't something I knew. And since I certainly was not the person who had put this idea in their heads, where did it come from? The author I knew from high school couldn't say. The notion had simply existed. It was a shadow cast by nothing. The only substantial point of reference was my body. In those days, I often rode in a wheelchair, but I had also frequently crossed the schoolyard on foot. I used to go out during breaks and stand around with everyone else in a circle. We would talk about our teachers, we would talk about Julius's too, and joust over who had read the furthest in that book. That's the kind of school it was. I thought I was just one among many. I didn't know I was projecting a particularly tragic aura. I did know I didn't have the words to express it. I am trying now to find them. I follow a timeline that others might have followed. I live in the same city where I grew up. I am an academic, a child of academics. I live a life like theirs. I am married and have a child with Ida, who is a woman who writes. My son has my eyes, which are my mother's eyes. His face has features reminiscent of childhood photographs of his grandfather. These are the threads that hold my life together. This is the fabric. Whenever I am recognized by someone who recalls the child I once was, a rift occurs, a rupture. The image is jarred. The life I live is displaced briefly by a reality that never happened. It glides past like a specter, depicting opaque but familiar images, phantom images of an alternate future that followed me until I became an adult. The recognition is followed by the same compliment. You look so good. And it is that word so, 2 letters at the center of a polite phrase that carries everything within it, that which could have been, that which never was. Did you get better? No, I say. I am more or less in the same shape that I used to be in, the way I was back then. My wheelchair is the same. I sometimes walk with my health. My health is fine. But you look like you're better. Memory plays tricks on us, never more so than when it teams up with our expectations. The part is not what happened then, it is what we are speaking about now. Shouldn't you be dead? I have surpassed expectations. I've come out on top, allied with nothing other than my own body, which has lived its life. On its own premises, my body does not know which diagnosis it has been given, what kind of prognosis it has received, and this is good. Never tell me the odds, as Han Solo once said. This is me as an adult. This is me as a father. This is me as a son. He has my eyes, but not my diagnosis. He is also, in more than one way, a result of everything that never happened. Into the unknown. We do not know where we are headed. We sail in a leaking vessel, or where we are dying animals. We dream of Byzantium, bailing with all our strengths. We sail together. We are argonauts, cosmonauts, adventurers, explorers. We are on a journey. Toward the end of high school and at the start of my 20s, I lived through films. I went to the cinema on Dronigan's Gate, summers as well as winters, once a month on a Sunday evening. The movie was a surprise. No one knew what was going to be screened until the lights were dimmed. I stood waiting in line with friends. Weekday mornings were for press screenings. I sat alone in the half-empty cinema. I watched my way through history from the silent film era on. I wanted to know who all the pivotal directors were, what was important. After a while, I arrived at Wim Wenders. In Wings of Desire, Bruno Ganz plays an angel, sporting a worn dark coat and a ponytail, wandering around Berlin. No one can see him, but he observes, he listens. He places an invisible hand on a shoulder. He is present. The screenplay was written by Peter Handke. I didn't know that back then. An old blind man is named in the credits as Homer. I also didn't notice that back then. What I did notice was this. The angel becomes human. He falls in love, but it is both easier and more complicated than that. He steps out of eternity and into the moment. The Greeks had two words for time. Chronos denotes the cosmic sense of time, while kairos signifies the here and now. It is within kairos that we live, and it is into kairos that the angel falls. He wants to have everything that exists there, that exists here, the sounds and the smells and the tastes. A cup of coffee, a cigarette, compliments to his suit and ponytail. Angels who are affixed in film are always affixed in time. The angel asks and the angel receives. He becomes human. Now he is mortal. And I knew this is true. Ida and I are in California. This is just before we travel to Hawaii. We are as far west as it's possible to get in the world, but now we are going to go even further west, 5 hours by plane out into the middle of the Pacific Ocean, to the group of islands that are more remote than any other, where there are skyscrapers and trafficked streets, but where, when the plane approaches at nighttime, all we see are lights and large dark fields that represent dormant volcanoes. Our time spent together in California is leisurely. I take time to read books about the place where we are and the place where we are going. I tell Ida about what I have been reading. We tell each other about the books we read. We both want to know what the other is thinking, but we also like hearing ourselves doing the telling. Each new book is an exploration, and through the telling, we reinforce the feeling of having traveled some distance, of having gained new land. We are not going to settle here, we know this. We are in San Francisco for a brief month and have digital return tickets in our email inboxes. Hawaii is an added luxury before our return. Planning this out of the way detour is my initiative and extravagant gesture in honor of our first long trip together. And at the same time, I print out the return tickets and keep them in my bag because I like feeling the security it provides. Our journey has safely defined parameters. But when we return home, we have a decision to make. We've been together for half a year and we've reached a turning point of sorts. We have spent more nights together than apart. Increasingly, Ida has left more... We have spent more nights together than apart. Increasingly, Ida has left more of her things behind in my apartment. We are in the process of becoming interwoven. If we don't move in together after our return, there will be no going back, only forward. Each person for themselves. We have a choice. There are no imperatives. We are free to do whatever we want. This is where I'm going to stop. It's very nice to read. I have to say, it's like those sections that feel very poetic. So yeah, give it a shot. You can find it in our news section. You can see the call number right here. If you want to place a hold on it, feel free to. As always, I hope you enjoyed this little reading, and I see you again in 2 weeks. Bye.